I spent 3 days making perfect cranberry sauce only to discover my mother-in-law had been secretly planning to divorce my father-in-law at our dinner table. The morning started like any other Thanksgiving. I was up at 5 a.m., prepping vegetables and checking my timeline for the third time. 20 people were coming to our house and I wanted everything to be perfect. My husband was still asleep, snoring peacefully while I stressed over whether I had enough butter for the mashed potatoes. I had been planning this dinner for weeks. Every dish was carefully selected, every timing calculated down to the minute. The turkey was a beautiful 22-pounder that I had brined for 2 days. The stuffing was my grandmother's recipe that I had finally mastered after years of failed attempts. I made 3 different types of potatoes because everyone has preferences, and I spent hours making homemade rolls that were supposed to be golden and fluffy. My mother-in-law arrived early, which I thought was sweet. She offered to help, but I had everything under control. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her purse and checking her phone constantly. I assumed she was just excited about seeing everyone. She kept complimenting my cooking, which was unusual for her. Normally, she would find subtle ways to suggest improvements or mention how she would have done things differently. The first guests started arriving around noon. My sister-in-law came with her 3 kids, who immediately ran to the living room and turned on the television way too loud. My parents arrived with wine and flowers, looking tired from their shower drive. Soon the house was filled with the chaos of family gatherings, kids running around, multiple conversations happening at once, and the constant opening and closing of the oven as I checked on various dishes. Everything was going perfectly. The turkey came out golden and juicy, the sides were all ready at the same time for once, and even the rolls had turned out exactly how I wanted them. I felt this overwhelming sense of pride watching everyone fill their plates and compliment the food. My husband kept bragging to his cousins about how amazing I was in the kitchen, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy and accomplished. We were about halfway through dinner when my mother-in-law stood up and tapped her wine glass with her fork. Everyone quieted down, expecting a nice toast about family and gratitude. Instead, she looked directly at my father-in-law and announced that she had filed for divorce 2 weeks ago and that this would be their last Thanksgiving together as a married couple. The silence that followed was deafening. My father-in-law dropped his fork, and it clattered against his plate. The kids stopped eating and looked around confused. My husband's face went completely white, and I could see his hands trembling slightly. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All those hours of preparation, all that effort to create a perfect family moment, and she chose this moment to drop this bomb. What made it worse was that she seemed almost relieved, like she had been carrying this secret for weeks and was finally free. She sat back down and continued eating her dinner like nothing had happened, while the rest of us sat there in shock. My father-in-law excused himself and went outside, and I could see him through the kitchen window, sitting on our porch with his head in his hands. I spent the rest of the dinner trying to salvage some normalcy for everyone else, especially the kids. I served dessert and tried to keep conversations going, but everything felt forced and awkward. People started leaving earlier than planned, making polite excuses about long drives and early mornings. By 7 p.m., our house was empty except for the mess and the leftover food that nobody had much appetite for. My husband and I spent the evening cleaning up in silence. I kept replaying the moment over and over, wondering if there were signs I had missed, if I could have somehow prevented this disaster. I felt angry at her for ruining what was supposed to be a beautiful day, but I also felt guilty for being angry when she was clearly going through something difficult. Update 1. It has been 2 weeks since the Thanksgiving disaster, and things have gotten significantly more complicated. I thought the drama was over, but I was completely wrong. Last Tuesday, my father-in-law showed up at our door at 10 p.m., crying and asking if he could stay with us for a few days. Apparently, my mother-in-law had changed the locks on their house and was claiming he had been having an affair for the past 6 months. The affair accusation came out of nowhere. My father-in-law swore up and down that he had been faithful, and honestly, I believed him. He is not the type of man who would cheat. He barely knows how to use his smartphone, let alone carry on a secret relationship. But my mother-in-law had somehow gotten hold of text messages between him and a woman from his book club, and she was convinced they proved an affair. I read the messages myself, and they were completely innocent. They were discussing book recommendations and meeting times, nothing romantic or inappropriate. But my mother-in-law was seeing what she wanted to see, finding hidden meanings in conversations about mystery novels and coffee shop locations. Having my father-in-law stay with us was emotionally exhausting. He would sit at our kitchen table for hours, staring at his phone and waiting for her to call. He barely ate anything and I could hear him pacing around the guest room at night. My husband was struggling too, caught between supporting his father and trying to understand why his mother was acting so irrationally. The real shock came when I decided to visit my mother-in-law to try to mediate the situation. I brought her some leftover containers from Thanksgiving dinner that I had been keeping in my freezer, thinking it might be a peace offering. When I arrived at their house, there was a strange car in the driveway that I did not recognize. She answered the door looking guilty and uncomfortable, and I could hear a man's voice coming from the kitchen. When I asked who was there, she reluctantly introduced me to her new boyfriend, a man she had apparently been seeing for 3 months. 3 months. She had been planning her divorce announcement at my Thanksgiving dinner while already dating someone else. The hypocrisy was stunning. She had accused her husband of having an affair based on innocent text messages while she was actually having a relationship with another man. When I confronted her about this, she became defensive and claimed that her marriage had been over in her heart for years, so it was not really cheating. I felt sick to my stomach. Not only had she ruined our family dinner, but she had been lying to everyone for months. I thought about all the times she had come to our house for Sunday dinners, acting like a devoted wife while secretly planning her escape. I remembered how she had complimented my cooking that day, probably feeling guilty about what she was about to do. The worst part was realizing that my father-in-law had been completely blindsided. He had no idea that his wife was unhappy, let alone that she was seeing someone else. While he was innocently discussing books with a friend, she was building a case against him to justify her own behavior. I drove home feeling angry and confused. My husband was waiting for me, hoping I had good news about his parents possibly working things out. Instead, I had to tell him that his mother had been lying to all of us for months and that the situation was much worse than we had imagined. Update 2. 3 months have passed since the divorce bombshell, and just when I thought our family had reached some kind of stability, everything exploded again in the most unexpected way possible. My father-in-law, who had been staying with us on and off, suddenly disappeared for 4 days without telling anyone where he was going. We were worried sick, calling hospitals and filing missing person reports. When he finally returned, he brought the most shocking news yet. During his disappearance, he had driven 8 hours to visit his brother in another state, something he had not done in over 15 years. While there, he discovered that my mother-in-law had been in contact with his brother's wife for months, sharing details about their marriage problems and asking for advice on how to leave him. But that was not even the biggest revelation. His sister-in-law showed him emails that my mother-in-law had sent, and in those emails, she admitted that she had been planning to leave him for over 2 years. She had been systematically moving money from their joint accounts into a private account, selling jewelry and family heirlooms without his knowledge, and even consulting with a lawyer about how to maximize her share of their assets. The book club affair accusation was completely fabricated. She had taken innocent messages and twisted them to create a narrative that would make him look like the unfaithful spouse. She had even gone so far as to hire a private investigator to follow him for 2 weeks, hoping to catch him doing something inappropriate. When the investigator found nothing, she decided to create her own evidence by misrepresenting his friendship with the woman from book club. My father-in-law was devastated, but also strangely relieved to finally understand what had been happening. He had spent months questioning his own memory and wondering if he had somehow failed as a husband. Learning that his wife had been systematically planning to destroy their marriage for years was horrible, but it also validated his confusion about why everything had fallen apart so suddenly. The financial revelations were the most disturbing part. Over the past 2 years, she had managed to hide almost $40,000 from him. She had sold her grandmother's ring, which was supposed to be passed down to my husband someday, and kept the money for herself. She had even taken out a credit card in his name and used it to pay her lawyer's fees, leaving him responsible for debt he did not know existed. My husband was absolutely furious when he learned about the financial manipulation. He had always respected his mother and trusted her completely. Discovering that she had been planning to financially devastate his father while pretending to be a loving wife changed everything for him. He called her and demanded an explanation, but she just accused him of taking sides and hung up on him. The strangest part of this whole mess was how my mother-in-law reacted when her planning was exposed. Instead of showing remorse or embarrassment, she became angry that her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. She started telling people that her husband and son were ganging up on her and that she was the real victim in the situation. She even had the audacity to call me and ask why I was not supporting her during this difficult time. She reminded me of all the times she had been kind to me over the years and suggested that I owed her loyalty. When I mentioned the money she had hidden and the lies she had told, she claimed that she had only been protecting herself from a man who was going to leave her with nothing. The conversation was surreal. She genuinely seemed to believe that her elaborate deception was justified and that everyone else was being unfair to her. She had convinced herself that she was the wrong party, despite overwhelming evidence of her own dishonesty and manipulation. I realized that the woman I thought I knew for 8 years had never really existed. The kind, family-oriented mother-in-law who brought homemade cookies to our house and remembered everyone's birthdays was apparently just a performance. The real person underneath was calculating and selfish, willing to destroy her family to get what she wanted. My father-in-law decided to fight the divorce proceedings with everything he had. Armed with evidence of her financial deception and the emails proving her long-term planning, his lawyer was confident that he could recover most of the money she had hidden. The divorce that she thought would be quick and profitable for her was turning into a lengthy legal battle that was costing her thousands in legal fees. Final update. 8 months after the Thanksgiving dinner from hell, I never could have imagined how this story would end. The divorce proceedings had been dragging on for months, with my mother-in-law fighting every attempt to recover the money she had hidden. Her boyfriend had already gotten tired of the drama and broken up with her, leaving her alone in the house she had fought so hard to keep. My father-in-law had been slowly rebuilding his life, staying with us part-time and finally finding his own apartment near downtown. He seemed happier than he had been in years, joining a hiking group and taking cooking classes that he had always wanted to try. The book club woman, who had been dragged into this mess unfairly, had become a genuine friend to him, and they were taking things very slowly and carefully. But then something happened that none of us saw coming. 2 weeks ago, my mother-in-law collapsed at her house and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors discovered that she had been hiding a serious medical condition for over a year, taking medication that explained some of her erratic behavior and emotional instability. The condition affected her judgment and impulse control, and her doctor explained that it could have contributed to the dramatic personality changes we had all noticed. Suddenly, her bizarre decision to announce the divorce at Thanksgiving dinner, her paranoid accusations about affairs, and even her financial planning made a different kind of sense. My husband and I were stunned. We had spent months being angry at her for destroying our family, and now we were learning that she might have been dealing with a medical crisis that she was too proud or scared to tell anyone about. The woman who had seemed so calculating and cruel might have actually been struggling with something beyond her control. My father-in-law's reaction surprised everyone. Despite everything she had put him through, he immediately went to the hospital and has been by her side ever since. When I asked him why, he said that the woman he fell in love with 30 years ago was still in there somewhere, and he was not going to abandon her when she needed help the most. The doctors adjusted her medication, and over the past 2 weeks, she has been like a completely different person. She was horrified when she fully understood what she had done to her family, especially the financial deception and the lies about affairs. She cried for hours when she realized that she had destroyed relationships with people who loved her while she was not thinking clearly. She asked to speak with me privately last week, and it was one of the most difficult conversations I have ever had. She apologized for ruining Thanksgiving dinner and acknowledged how much work I had put into making that day special. She also thanked me for taking care of her husband when she was not capable of doing it herself. The weird thing is that I found myself forgiving her more easily than I expected. Seeing her genuinely confused and remorseful about her behavior made it clear that the woman who had caused so much pain was not entirely the same person sitting in front of me now. It did not excuse everything that happened, but it explained it in a way that made forgiveness possible. My father-in-law has decided to put the divorce proceedings on hold while she gets her health stabilized. They are going to try marriage counseling once she is feeling better, though they both acknowledge that they have a long road ahead of them. Some of the trust that was broken might never be fully repaired, but they are both committed to trying. The financial issues are still being sorted out, but she has agreed to return all the money she hid and to work together on rebuilding their assets. She even found her grandmother's ring, which she had not actually sold but had hidden in a safety deposit box during one of her confused episodes. My husband is still processing everything. He went from being angry at his mother for months to feeling guilty about being angry once he learned about her medical condition. We have been talking a lot about how mental health issues can affect entire families, not just the person who is struggling. As for me, I am planning next year's Thanksgiving dinner, but this time I am keeping it small. Just our immediate family, simple dishes, and absolutely no major announcements allowed. I learned that sometimes the most important thing about a family gathering is not the perfect food or the beautiful table setting, but having the wisdom to recognize when the people you love are struggling, even when they cannot tell you themselves. Looking back on that terrible Thanksgiving day, I realize it was actually the beginning of our family learning how to support each other through really difficult times. It was not the celebration I had planned, but it led to conversations and growth that might never have happened otherwise. Sometimes the worst family dinners end up being the most important ones, even if it takes months to understand why.